assalamu alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal. My name is Farheen Khan, and you're watching the Azeeza Show. Today we're actually going to talk about poverty reduction and the impact that it has. A lot of times we think poverty is something that is very far from us, is in a different country, and certainly there is poverty around the world, but today we're going to talk a lot more about local poverty and what that does. So with me today, we have our guests, Gurcharan and Zainab. Hussain. Welcome. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you for having me.
So I want to jump right into it. So maybe we can start with just sort of, introducing yourselves and let us know, let our audience know who you are, and then we'll start the conversation. Do you want to start?
Oh, okay, sure. My name is Zainab. I work as the creative director at National Zakat Foundation and Nissa Homes. Wonderful. So National Zakat Foundation was born out of the need to support the Canadian Muslim community. Although there is social assistance from the government, but we found that that wasn't enough, especially with a lot of refugees coming in, and right off the bat, they don't necessarily get childcare benefits, healthcare, etc. So it was really born out of that need. And our second project is Nissa Homes.
Right.
And it is it's a transitional home to support Muslim women and children, to house them, whether they will be going through domestic violence, homelessness, and just really helping them become independent and going on with their life, basically.
Wonderful. That's great. Welcome.
I'm a youth worker, a community developer, and right now I am a school trustee candidate for Ward 5 Mississauga.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Well,
welcome to both of you. So let's just jump right into it. So let's talk about poverty. So how pervasive is poverty in Canada?
So it used to be that you go to school, you finish your education, you get a job. If things happen, there's a crisis, you rely on the social service system, you get back on your feet. But that track is now broken because of many factors. For example, the economy is not what it used to be. A lot of jobs are either being automated or they're being outsourced. There's a lot more precarious work. And just having an education is no longer a guarantee. 1 in 4 recent graduates actually don't really have a job in their field. And so definitely poverty in Canada is very pervasive, especially in racialized communities. 20% of racialized communities are way more affected than non-racialized people. And that's why we're here and we're doing something about it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I've definitely seen a change from when I went to school versus as a youth worker. I see students come out from high school. Lunch or breakfast is at the vending machine, or they can't participate in after school programs because they're looking after their siblings while their parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, right?
Exactly.
So it affects so much, and there's a lot that can be done. And great that we have organizations like yours.
Definitely.
It's wonderful. Well, what do you think we talk poverty. Poverty is a huge thing, right? So it's not just one. There's a lot of, different sort of things that contribute to poverty. Let's talk about, can you define for us what is poverty and what it looks like?
So currently, there is no poverty line in Canada, and so there are different measures of poverty that are being taken, but officially there is no poverty line. And I know that the federal government is now going to come out with an official poverty line, but poverty is very different in different communities in Canada. So it can go from, in many geographic areas, it can go up to 40%. And for example, in the Korean communities, it's about 40%. So it really, and that's why poverty is hidden in Canada, not because many communities are so isolated from one another that we never know, a few kilometers from us, there are people that for example, cannot even buy a mattress for their daughter. That's actually a real case that happened to us just last week. A single mother was on, she was on ODSP, and she also had child tax benefits, but she was just living paycheck to paycheck, to the point that if there was a need that arose, she couldn't afford something as simple as buying a mattress for her daughter. So, yeah.
Sorry, it was what does poverty look like?
Yeah, what does poverty look like? And what are the things that contribute to poverty? What are the things that are connected to it?
So One of the things I find really troubling is that in the Peel region, because I'm from Mississauga, and a lot of, sorry, what I'm going to say is going to be about Mississauga because I'm talking from my own lived experience.
Of course.
And so poverty, I think, looks very different in Peel than it does in Toronto, where people associate poverty with like homelessness or people ask like on the streets asking for help, right? Whereas in Peel, it's more sleeping in cars, not affording rent. It's more, so it's not as in your face. And because Mississauga is so sprawled out, there's not a lot of concentrated areas where you would see homelessness, like the way they see it in Toronto, right? So for me, that's what it is. It's also like, I believe United Way says that just 1 in 5 kids who are living in poverty, right? And that is evident in the schools because there's a lot of children not having breakfast in the mornings. Like breakfast clubs programs are really important. There are a lot of children missing school because they're sick and they're getting more sick and they can't, there's some missing classes. So we see, dropout rates increasing. We see test scores going down because it's not a priority to focus on that stuff, right? So that's what poverty looks like. It looks like low test scores or low academic success. Right.
And how do you guys feel about this, the elimination of the basic income that's happening provincially?
Do you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, I don't know what you think, but the elimination of the basic income, I think it was because partly of the attitudes that exist that it feels like it's a handout. We're giving away free things that people aren't working for. Is the attitudes that I think we have as a society towards people in poverty, where it's like blame the victim or it's their own fault. They should just get a job. And I'm just saying
you're right. That's the kind of perspective people have,
right?
Which is ridiculous.
And that's why I think was a large force behind killing the basic income pilot. And the pilot didn't even finish, so we don't have data to even know if it was.
But what are the implications? Like, what do you think are the implications when somebody comes off of that in March?
So, I've heard of a lot of stories, like in Hamilton, from one of them, people were coming forward and saying that they've already made arrangements, and so they now because the government's like actually breaking a contract, and I think there's a legal case out right now against this. I'm not too well versed on it. I don't know. Do you know much about?
So what I mean, just if you look at historical trends. I believe in the 1970s, Dauphin, Manitoba had something similar. They had the guaranteed income program, and it actually did run for 4 years. And one of the trends that they did see was there was a higher enrollment in teenage boys in school, and there was a lower drop in employment in the same demographic group. So that means that they were able to afford to go back to school and complete their education, which further means that they can become productive members of the society. They no longer have to do precarious jobs. So just looking at historical trends, it seemed like it did work. But right now we don't know because it was eliminated, so we don't know the results of that.
And I think on top of that too, I think the partly behind that was to get rid of all like the different programs and stuff and say this is sort of the lump sum sort of thing, and we get rid of all the begging for this or that. All those programs you have to apply for, and they're very invasive and all. Definitely, if you've ever been through any sort of OW, it's hectic.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's just adding to the mental health that we're not even talking about that is associated
well,
with poverty.
Exactly. So let's talk about some of the other things that are connected to poverty, shall we? So why don't we talk about homelessness? Can we talk about that? So what is what are your thoughts on how poverty and homelessness and housing are connected?
So just in my experience at National Zakat Foundation, over 80% of our funds actually go towards paying people's rents and making sure that they have a shelter. What happens is that, as we all know, and I feel like on some level we all are suffering from the housing crisis in Toronto. I was just reading up the other day, to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in the city of Toronto is $2,000. But if you look at Ontario Works numbers, the maximum they can give you is about $700 something for a family of 4.
Absolutely.
So the numbers just they're not even close to, close to
No.
it. Even if a family has exhausted all the government assistance, they still cannot afford to live in the city. And I think homelessness, especially because we have such harsh weather in the winter months, definitely homelessness is a huge issue, and it actually costs the government a lot more than if they were to just do something about it in terms of healthcare costs, in terms of, you know, their health is deteriorating and they're in and out of hospitals. That costs the government a lot more than if they were to do something to fix such issues.
Right.
Now, I know Peel specifically is looking into some homelessness projects. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I think there was the 20,000 homes
Campaign, yeah, and they've also actually started to identify. They went through and did a whole audit of all the individuals that are homeless in Peel.
Yeah.
And actually have identified, I believe, 670 individuals that are dealing with chronic homelessness, and then are starting to kind of, you know, work towards eliminating poverty, or homelessness in a certain number of years in the next little while. Yeah. So that's good. I mean, certainly they're sort of, and they're part of, you know, a larger strategy, which is the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and they are really doing their great work to advocate.
We did do a show on this.
We did. We talked about homelessness, but they're doing they're doing some work on really lobbying the government to, you know, introduce a housing and homelessness strategy.
So, yeah, there is a housing strategy, right?
Right, but there's no poverty reduction strategy per se at a federal level. I think they've announced something. Did you guys have thoughts around that?
The opportunity for all? Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, I know there are a lot of critics around that issue. A lot of people are saying that they're just taking all the existing programs and putting a nice little bow on it and presenting it as, I guess, as something that already exists. But if you look at it, if you just do a deeper analysis, like I said before, now officially Canada is coming out with an official poverty line. So we are able to measure poverty better, and then we have a greater understanding of what Canadians are going through. And secondly, I know that they do have some promises. So by 2030, they're saying that about 30%, they would eradicate poverty by 30%, and by 2030, I believe they would eradicate poverty by 50%.
Right.
So I guess we just wait and see, and if those numbers are able to
good.
match.
We're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be back. We'll be back right after this. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Azeeza Show. We were just talking about the issue of poverty and basically poverty reduction in Canada. So with me are Ryan and Zainab. So we were just talking earlier about, you know, how pervasive is poverty and some of the sort of, you know, elements that kind of are connected to poverty. But also wanted to talk about, you know, let's get a little more personal and real. Like what, you know, inspires you to get involved in the work that you do? How is that connected to the issue of poverty? Why do you care?
So I got involved with National Zakat Foundation because I come from like a second generation immigrant family, and anytime we want to help people, we're always like, oh, we need to send money back home, we need to send money to Pakistan, because what we don't realize is that just in our neighborhoods there are people that need very basic needs. They're a month away from being homeless. They don't have enough money to pay for just very basic needs that we don't even realize those needs exist in Canada. And I guess I was kind of in denial, but then I started to see a lot of, I'm sure you've seen them too, a lot of Syrian refugees when they start around 2015 and 2016, you saw that a lot of them were in the streets, they were asking for money, and then I realized that maybe poverty does exist, and then I did my own research, and then I saw that there is indeed an organization that exists, and the more I looked into it, the more I learned. We have distributed so far, in just a matter of a few years, $2.5 million just in basic needs.
Wonderful.
And we constantly have to turn people away just because we just cannot help everybody. So that's kind of my personal story on why I started working in this field.
Wonderful.
For me, it was, I guess, as a youth worker, I saw poverty firsthand as a frontline worker, right? It was it was disproportionately targeting racialized folks and women specifically, single mothers. I'd see their kids try to come through. They'd have to quit school to help out with the family finances to try and make rent. Issues with not, I think you were saying the basic sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like
Yeah,
the basic
absolutely.
needs are not being met. They weren't getting sleep, like they were busy working.
That's right.
They were studying or trying to do whatever it is to keep their family together. They were fighting with their family because mental health is a huge issue around that. And also, they weren't eating, it wasn't a priority, or being active, or doing any of that stuff, right? So school wasn't a priority, and a lot of what happens after that is students just try to go into survival mode, and it's not about trying to do what's best for your education or try and make a better life.
Or to break that cycle at all.
No, it's
Just living day to day.
that's exactly what it became, or is in parts of Mississauga, and that's what sort of pushed me to really want to get involved and do, because try and change things as much as I can. I mean, and it's so great after, because then you really get that satisfaction. Like one of my students from a while ago, at risk of dropping out of school, family was broken, had to. I think CAS came in and foster parents, and then it just escalated, and there's a lot of abuse, and and I just saw her the other day, and now she's an officer with the Peel Police.
That's wonderful.
And she's helping other youths who are going through that cycle. So it's trying to get those key organizers, get them out of that cycle, and show them that there is something better. And that's why I got involved. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And that's why I'm actually running for school trustee.
That's
So I do a plug.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Why are you doing that, Ryan? Tell us.
How political I could get. But no, that's the main reason why I am running for school trustee, because I'm going to change. Not that the Appeal Board is not addressing poverty. I think it's more progressive in terms of how it deals with poverty. Like after We Welcome the World, which newcomers, like a lot of Syrians, came to Mississauga, they were able to go through that process, and that connects them to like settlement services, employment services, a bunch of, but I think we can do a lot more.
Right.
Definitely.
Right.
I just want to add a little bit to what Ryan said. I know there are a lot of government services that are available, and they're not designed to make you comfortable. They're designed to just let you just make your basic needs met, so you can find a job, etc. But it's such a cookie cutter approach that it doesn't. What if you're a Syrian refugee, like you said, and yours, so when they come in, they're claimants a lot of times, and they're not really eligible to a lot of services.
Right.
And I find that they may not even know what they're eligible for. An organization needs to exist to tell them, here's what you can apply for, or this is what you're eligible for, etc. And one of our other goals is to help them become productive members of the society. So, for example, we had a single mom living at Nissa Homes, and she was doing her PhD, but she was in an abusive marriage, and she was at the verge of dropping out. We told her, just focus on getting your education, and then we will take care of the rest. She was able to finish her PhD, and now she works for the UN. Imagine if she had dropped out, and then she wouldn't be as successful, or she wouldn't be contributing as much as she is now.
That's wonderful.
And that's probably like if there was a guaranteed basic income.
That would allow people to do that. That's right.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I mean, I just want to also say, like, I mean, we're having this discussion. I think part of the reason, like you talked about, Ryan, like, you're running in Malton, and you were doing youth work in Malton, right?
Ward 5.
So Mississauga,
Ward 5. So the ward that I'm running in is really two communities. There's the Malton community, which I was born and raised and grew up in, and I think you were there too.
Yeah.
But I didn't know you at that time.
That is true.
Just full disclosure. But there is the other part of Mississauga, the Ward 5, that isn't, they're not seeing the same poverty issues that people in Malton are seeing, but they're seeing poverty in different ways too, right? They're still dealing with it, like not enough after school programs.
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah, you know, so like summer camps not being affordable,
Right.
and stuff like that.
Right, absolutely. No, and I was just going to say that I remember like growing up in, first we were in Erin Mills area in Mississauga, and then, like, and I don't want to just, leave it at sort of, for example, the fact that, obviously, our heart goes out to the refugees that have come here, but poverty is something that also affects a lot of new immigrants, period, right? And not just new immigrants. I mean, it affects everybody, right?
A lot of
There's
people,
really no face to it. It affects anybody and anybody.
all Canadians.
All
I've seen
Canadians.
tons of like citizens, not
Yeah.
just permanent residents, but actual citizens who've been there, who've born in
Right,
Canada.
yeah, exactly, generationally, and are
Yes.
still dealing with poverty, right? Like, I mean,
Precarious employment is huge. It's,
Absolutely.
being laid off, a lot of jobs being moved over, and
exactly. So, I mean, we're all dealing with it. I mean, and I think that, sometimes there's this like stigma of like, well, like, oh, it's that community, it's not my community, or it's, those people, it's not me, and it's not us. And it's just like, we don't realize how close it is to us, actually, and sometimes that we ourselves are dealing with it, right? Like, I mean, my example, I worked at United Way, and I've worked at a lot of different not-for-profit organizations. My work has always been around anti-poverty, anti-violence. Why? Because that's my lived experience, right? Like, I had to leave school, school when I was 16 so I could start working to support my family. That's a real life story, right? I'm just really, grateful that like United Way and other groups had programs that could teach me as a young person to become quota leader, right? That's how United Way of Toronto really helped me. I started to think beyond myself. I'm like, wait a minute, instead of doing 3 jobs and like, skipping class in the morning and trying to help my siblings and volunteering at the breakfast club so that we could also get access to it, like all of those things, and then thinking, okay, so if I actually, continue to try and finish my education, whatever it is, and work full time and take care of my family, then maybe, I got to think big picture, long run, right? Like, this isn't just about today. This is about, 5 years from now. This is about 10 years from now. How is that going to change my family, right? So, I mean, these are like the lived, this is real life for a lot of us, right? I remember sitting with my, I remember one time where my dad got really ill and we were home, and I'll never forget my little brother, who's now, of course, a big boy, but at the time he was like 2 years old. And I remember my mom saying to me, we need to get milk. And so this is what sort of got me into starting to work when I was 16. I decided, that's it, I'm done with school, I just need to start working. It's like, I was actually standing there, and mom's like, okay, well, we need milk for the kids. And I've got 3 kids, younger siblings, like they were very young at the time, they're toddlers. So we're like, okay, we need milk. So we literally were counting pennies out of a jar. Like, we put pennies into jars, never thinking we'll use them, right? Like, this is never a thing. But I was literally counting out pennies. I get to the grocery store, and my brother comes over with a box of cookies, right? $2 cookies. I had to say no. And that child was crying because he was like, I want that, and I was like, I only have exactly enough to buy this bag of milk, and that's really what, for me, the reality hit, well, because like, what am I doing? Like, is school really going to help me at this moment in time? No. What I actually need is food on the table. How am I going to make that happen, right? So that's really, when we talk about school, when you talk about people's lived experiences, that's what it's really about. So, I mean, let's talk about racialized poverty, right? Zainab, one of the things that you talked about was, the fact that you've said that there's statistics that show that, there's a higher rate of poverty in racialized communities. Can we talk a little bit about that? What do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a reality. And because I feel like different communities are so isolated from each other, even within the Muslim community, we don't necessarily realize the need that exists.
Right. But why racialized people? Why is it higher?
I know some people who say it's genetics. No. Yeah, we laugh at that, but they truly believe that. I think, I know it's disgusting. But I honestly believe the reason why there's a higher target or a disproportionate number of racialized folks in poverty is because there are advantages that they just don't have. Like, if you put your name as Ryan on a resume, I have a better chance of getting even a booking, getting an interview than Rajdeep, right?
Right.
Is that a thing? Rajdeep?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. There's added barriers.
There's definitely added
racism
barriers. If there's more of a chance of me being caught up in the criminal sort of legal system just by being a person of color than there is in living with, I don't want to call it Lauren Park, but I am, living in Lauren Park versus living in like Meadowville, or where did you, Erin Mills,
Erin
right?
Mills,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like even
exactly.
there, right?
Exactly.
So,
Okay.
I think there are a lot of different barriers that we need to address.
Okay, well, I mean, we're very short on time now. Surprisingly, we've like almost gotten, to the end of the show. Do you guys have any 30 seconds, last minute thoughts on this issue?
You wanna?
No, you go first.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, there's a lot being done, and then there's a lot of room for a lot more efforts when it comes to racialized poverty, in whether it be in the province or just nationwide, and definitely when it comes to racialized poverty, like Ryan said, because it's in the immigrant community, one of the things that we do see is people that are educated outside of Canada, when they come in, they might be doctors, they might be lawyers, they might be engineers. They don't have the equivalency. It doesn't only affect them financially, but it affects them socially and mentally as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I wish we had more time. I'm so sorry.
I'm good. No, I'm good. I was just going to say exactly that, so you don't have to now.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for being on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience, for watching. We'll see you again next week. Take care.